What's up, everybody? It's the Higgs here from MMO-Play.com, joining you for another top list. This is a top 10 countdown of the best 10 World of Warcraft villains that still pose a threat. We are going to jump right in right after I give you a brief explanation of why these villains are appearing on this list. So really, when you've got a list like this, it's almost always going to be subjective. So I thought right up front, I'd just tell you guys why these people are on my list, what sort of criteria I put the villains up against to see who made it on the list and who didn't. The very first one is obvious. It's, are these people still a threat? That's the name of this countdown here. So the very first criteria is, are they still a threat? That doesn't necessarily mean that if they are dead, they won't appear on this list, or if you've been following the storyline of Warlords of Draenor, if they are dead in Azeroth but not dead in Draenor, that they will not appear on this list. It just means, do they still pose a threat alive or dead? Beyond that first criteria, my next question that I asked was this character ever good? I think looking at Warcraft lore and really just narrative evil characters in general, there's always something that's a little bit more evil about a character that chooses to go bad and really goes all the way than a character that just came out that way. My next criteria is how much power do they have? The potential for the most damage. You know, it's one thing to be a really bad person, but it's another thing to be a really bad millionaire. So you have to have influence, you have to have power in order to make it on this list. And the last criteria I have is what I'm calling atrocity count, and that is just basically, have they used their evil will before? And if so, what was the effect of it? How many lives did they end or alter by using or thrusting their evil will upon the game universe that we all know and love? So those are my 4 criteria, and I use them to calculate this list. Now, there should be some already, some really big Warcraft villains that you should already be crossing off in your mind. They're not going to appear on this list. Arthas is a good example of that. He's usually number 1 through 3 on almost everybody else's list. I'll tell you right up to bat, he's not going to be on this because he's not a threat anymore. So this is a little bit different than the top villain lists that are around these days. These are villains that, as of patch 6.1 in Warlords of Draenor, are still a threat and meet these other 3 criteria. So let us jump right in. Number 10. So for number 10, I was originally going to go with Cho'Gall, but following the events there at the very end of High Maul Mythic difficulty, that can't be done. Don't want to say why in case you haven't seen that yet, but for reasons which I cannot state, Cho'Gall cannot appear on this list as much as I would like him to. So instead, I'm going to go with a kind of newer villain who hasn't really done a whole lot yet, but her deeds have left a huge ripple in the Horde especially. I'm talking about Magatha Grim Totem. Now, if you don't know, Magatha is a Tauren from the Grim Totem clan, obviously. So first, she is enormously powerful among the Taurens. She is the oldest living Grim Totem. She's also the most powerful shaman that they've got in the Grim Totems. She also has an alliance forged with the Forsaken, which makes her a little bit stronger. Apart from that, in terms of her personality, she's pretty power hungry, and she had a serious problem with Cairn and Bloodhoof. Now, Cairn was the leader of the Horde until he was slain by Garrosh Hellscream, but it wasn't just Garrosh. If you don't know, the story is that before the battle, Magatha decided to quote-unquote bless Garrosh's weapon, and that took the form of poisoning it, which was the reason that Garrosh defeated Cairn and the reason that Cairn died. After Cairn's death, Bane Bloodhoof steps up to the mantle, leads the Tauren, and banishes Magatha. So she goes off to Thousand Needles, and from there you would think that her story might be over, but you would be wrong. She uses members of the Alliance or Horde. She uses us adventurers. She manipulates us into freeing her. Once she's freed, she seizes a powerful artifact known as the Doomstone and disappears. So I really like Magatha, and I'm putting her on this list because I think we're going to see a whole lot more of her. With her decision to help Garrosh Hellscream murder Cairn Bloodhoof, I think she went over a line. And I think the evidence of that is shown even more clearly in her willingness to manipulate adventurers and to basically tell them that if she ever comes across them again, she'll kill them too once she's free. So she's got power in terms of her alliance with the undead. She's powerful as a shaman. She now has the Doomstone, and she is at large. I'm not saying she's gonna be a major villain that we're gonna see, you know, destroy the world or anything, but I think she's one of the cooler minor villains that, given the right circumstance and the right place at the right time, she could cause a whole lot of mayhem. Number 9. One of the villains that was in serious consideration for this list was Ragnaros, but obviously Ragnaros can't be on this list because he's been dealt with in the Firelands. But then I got to thinking, well, what about the other elementals, the ones that are still around? What kind of threat do they pose? And the answer is just as big a threat as Ragnaros. I mean, we haven't really seen it yet. We've got some previous history of Alakir, for instance, causing some mayhem. But even without a completely clear history of violence, Neptulon, Therazane, Alakir, all of the elemental lords are incredibly powerful and also have direct affiliations with the old gods. This means that, in my mind, the will of the elemental lords is a completely separate thing from the will of the denizens of Azeroth, which means that when the two come in conflict, as they have in the past and will in the future, the elemental lords can be some powerful enemies. Number 8. Queen Jarrah is potentially one of the largest villains to be unveiled in the future of World of Warcraft, but within the actual game itself, she hasn't done a whole lot. Why she's on this list, however, is because of events that take place way before the start of World of Warcraft and a little bit of what happens in the game. Basically, what you need to know about Queen Jarrah is that she was this night elf ruler that everyone loved, and she attracted the attention of Sargeras, who we are going to talk about in more depth later on in this countdown. And not only did she attract his attention, she herself became attracted to him. And this direct connection in her mind with an incredibly evil, powerful force in the form of Sargeras turned Queen Jarrah into a maniac. She ended up directly causing the War of the Ancients, corrupting the Well of Eternity, and essentially setting in place many of the events that would go on to presumably be the very near or complete unraveling of Azeroth. Perhaps what is most intriguing about Jarrah is that she's still alive. She is in an ocean trench, now a Naga, having been turned. She rules over the rest of the Naga and is really just biding her time. I mean, everybody who plays Warcraft and knows her story thinks that there is a Jarrah expansion coming. That was only amplified by the events of the Cataclysm and the storyline in Vashj'ir. So Jarrah is not only one of the current alive villains that's plotting and is going to be a main villain in an expansion, she's also one of the most powerful. The only reason she's so far down this list is because her atrocity count in game isn't really that high yet, but if you ask me again in 5 years or so, I'm sure she'll be right up in the top 3. Number 7. And now we get into what is undoubtedly the first controversial pick on this list, Sylvanas. Look, I've had conversations with people on Reddit, on YouTube, all over the place about Sylvanas and whether or not she is a villain. If you guys know me, you know that I play undead. I am a Forsaken lover. I always have been. I always will be. They're my favorite race to play. They've got my favorite racial. They're my favorite characters to look at. On a lore level, I sympathize with them more than any other race in the game. As such, I feel like Sylvanas is my leader. I think as a WoW player, we all feel like we have that one character that we look to more than the other characters, you know, whether it's Karin or Bane or Goel or Garrosh. We all have that one character. That was all Horde, wasn't it? I guess Varian's okay. We all have that one character that we look to and say, that is the leader of me as a player, whether or not that leader is necessarily the designated leader. In my case, fortunately, Sylvanas is the designated leader of my race, so it's hard for me to call her a villain. And honestly, I hope that there's still redemption in her, but I severely doubt it. And the reason why is pretty simple. She is using means to achieve ends which only benefit her and her race. As time progresses, following the betrayal, especially I think in war crimes, Sylvanas is becoming more and more single-minded about ensuring the future of her race and is going to extreme ends to secure that future. I struggle to think of how it is any different from what Garrosh did, or at least how it has the potential to become the same thing. I think in the Garrosh and Sylvanas encounter, Garrosh had a really good point of Sylvanas when he simply asked her what the difference was between her and the Lich King, because she was reanimating the dead just like he was.
Have you given any thought to what this means, Sylvanas? What difference is there between you and the Lich King now?
Isn't it obvious, War Chief? I serve the Horde.
Of course, as an undead player, I can easily justify that and say, well, she's reanimating the dead. She's not controlling the dead. There is a difference. But even as a fan of the race and as a fan of her as a character, I've got to say that that's a pretty shaky argument. I actually think I'm going to love Sylvanas no matter what happens with her, no matter which direction they take her. She's a fascinating character to me, and she appears on this list especially because at one point she was so good, and she has done a complete 180.
Number 6.
The Old Gods are, I think, probably the most interesting looking villains in the entire game, but they appear on this list. I mean, if you guys play WoW, you know why the Old Gods are here. They are single-mindedly purposeful and willful, have little to no respect or care or concern for the various races on Azeroth or Draenor or anywhere else where they exist, which does appear to be everywhere, including Outland. They are chaos, they are destruction, they are supremely powerful. Every time one has appeared in the game thus far, it has left nothing but devastation in its wake. And apart from that, they are still super fun to fight. I was actually running around with a friend who was doing some achievements in Ulduar 25, and I was just basically helping this guy with any achievements that required more than one person. And for the achievements there at the end for Yogg Saron, it was all one-person achievements. So really, I just sort of camped in the side of the room. I told him I was going to do it. I just camped out in the side of the room, let him take the fight. I was like, I'm going to go make some coffee, enjoy your fight, good luck on the achievements. I'll see you in a minute. I came back and we were both dead. This guy at level 100 had wiped on Yogg Saron because he didn't know the fight. Those fights in this game are so rare. Fights that are still interesting and engaging and fun, and the Old God fights are still like that. Also, the potential for future devastation on the part of the Old Gods is massive.
Number 5.
Well, I said Arthas wouldn't appear on this list. I didn't say anything about the Lich King. The Lich King as a character is sort of a tricky one to put your finger on. Obviously, the first Lich King, Ner'zhul, and he was turned into the Lich King after his soul being shredded and put back together over and over and over again. He starts to lead the undead at the Burning Legion's request, eventually develops a will of his own, and uses various pawns to separate himself and crown a new Lich King. That becomes Arthas. If he were still a threat, he would definitely be on this list, but he's not. That becomes Arthas, the Prince of Menethil, who destroys his kingdom, kills his father, and wreaks so much havoc on the world that we're still reeling from it in the events of Warlords of Draenor. We're still reeling from Arthas's mayhem. He is eventually killed by us and his former prisoner, whom he had tortured relentlessly and who had been completely destroyed by Dragon's Flame at the events of the Wrathgate. Bolvar Fordragon takes over the mantle. At present, the Lich King slumbers in Icecrown with flaming eyes. So a lot of people have asked the question of, will the new Lich King become a threat? And I think the answer to this question is obviously yes. Anyone who commands that much power, the power over the undead, is a threat, no matter how good they are. Because the immediate question is, good for who or whom, I guess? Let's not forget, Bolvar was a human. Could there be a circumstance in the future in which he uses the power of the undead to aid the Alliance against the Horde? Could he be driven insane? He wouldn't be the first Lich King to be absolutely bananas. Could he, in a Ner'zhul-like fit not be able to handle being the Lich King, manipulate someone else to take over the mantle so that he can find some peace, and then give us Arthas 2.0? The answer to all of these questions is yes. It doesn't necessarily matter how good he was when he put the crown on. Putting the crown on gives him immense power, and I don't know if he can handle it. I don't know if he can maintain his sanity while he has it. So the last question with the Lich King is atrocity count. While Bolvar himself is not directly responsible for any atrocities that I know of as the Lich King, the mantle of the Lich King itself is responsible for almost nothing but atrocity.
Number 4.
Here's another place where we run into Draenor bringing back problems that we dealt with in the past, Gul'dan. In our Azeroth's timeline, Gul'dan was in his life responsible for the corruption of the orcs, and in his death partially responsible for the madness of Illidan. I think now's a good time actually to mention that Illidan deserves special mention even though he's not directly a threat. Illidan is one of my favorite villains. I think he's one of everyone's favorite villains, and right now, as there have been for years, there are whispers that Illidan is returning, but I can't put him on this list in good conscience without any proof that that's actually happening, so I have to assume he's dead, even though my little Azerothian heart wants him back desperately. Anyway, back to Gul'dan. Shaman turned warlock, relatively peaceful, quiet guy turned absolute madman. Almost every terrible event that happened to the orcs in our Azeroth or in Draenor that we're in now can be traced back to Ner'zhul and by extension Gul'dan. He's probably the most influential lackey of any majorly powerful villain in the game. Gul'dan serves the will of his master so acutely, so perfectly, with such ferocity and tenacity. His power lust fuels him to commit atrocities that are almost unthinkable. And as of right now, the Draenor version of him is still very, very much a threat. I would argue the largest threat because the Burning Legion has yet to really peek its head out.
Number 3.
Kil Jaeden is supremely powerful. He is one of the original 3 that were attempted to be corrupted by Sargeras, the other one being Archmond, who is now dead, and Velen, who I will keep my mouth shut about in case you haven't played all of Warlords of Draenor yet. Kil Jaeden, the Deceiver, is supremely powerful. He is the right-hand man of Sargeras, the acting leader of the Burning Legion. Even before Archmond was destroyed, Kil Jaeden was more powerful. 25,000 years ago, Sargeras was basically elected him chief lieutenant. His entire agenda was to assimilate or destroy every race in the universe. He's done a lot of things to accomplish this end, including creating the Lich King. He's tried to enter Azeroth, and most recently was shoved back through his portal to do so by we heroes. He's without a doubt one of the most devastating villains. He was at one point good-ish as far as we know, but had a massive ego and would really pretty much give in to anyone that appealed to that ego. But now he is absolute pure evil. Beyond that, he is one of the smartest villains in the game, and you can be sure that there will be a Kil Jaeden expansion again in the future, without a doubt. We will be facing off against him at some point, and the events that lead us to do so will likely be the most devastating events that have happened to the planet yet.
Number 2.
And now we get to another controversial pick, I think, the Pantheon. So a lot of people see the Pantheon as this really positive force in the universe. Their whole goal is to basically go around the universe, turning chaotic atmospheres and planets into something that has order, something that has justice, something that has a sense of morality, and basically acts in harmony with itself. And on the surface, that goal seems very good and pure and wonderful. But the way that the Titans go about achieving this harmony is sometimes so cold and menacing and calculated that there's no other word for it than pure evil. I mean, what is evil? In this sense, we're talking about we as players in this world, our characters as participants in this world are essentially good. And that means that any force that acts upon us as an antagonist to our livelihood and continuing striving on the planet is essentially evil. And the Titans and the Pantheon have done this. Probably the most notable example is Gul'dan in Ulduar, who threatened to destroy the entire world and came really, really close to achieving that goal. The thing with the Titans is that they have a very clear line, it seems to me. And if that line is crossed, they have no hesitation to engage in mass extinction. That sort of morality where they have a morality that they view as pure and the absolute morality of the universe is either obeyed 100% or you're destroyed for not obeying it. And that is the definition of a dictatorship. So in addition to the fact that they are supremely powerful, that they are responsible for Sargeras, and that their atrocity count is probably bigger than anyone else in the universe, including Sargeras, the Titans, the Pantheon of the Titans definitely appear on this list.
Number 1.
Well, I've dropped his name about 500 times. I guess it's about time to get Sargeras on this list. In my mind, there really is no other villain in the World of Warcraft. In terms of atrocity count, he's maybe only surpassed by the Titans, which he was one of. So when you add in all the atrocities that he committed while in the Pantheon, he maybe is going pretty close with the Titans. In terms of power and potential for power, his power is massive. It may even rival the Titans as the leader of basically the entire darkness of the universe. Every demon, every dark anything is under the control of Sargeras. Even some of the playable races in World of Warcraft were once under the control of Sargeras, either directly or indirectly. Even some of the classes in World of Warcraft are directly or indirectly were under the will of Sargeras. He is, without a doubt, the most influential evil character on the universe. His will has caused more devastation, despair, and destruction than any other villain. And the last criteria that he meets, that I think he meets more fully than anyone else on this list, is the question of, was he ever a good guy? Sargeras was not only a good guy, he was the best guy. His transformation is something akin to John the Baptist becoming Charles Manson. On the one hand, he is the right hand of an organization, a council, which is responsible for creating and fostering goodness throughout the universe. He is the weapon of that organization that banishes or destroys anything that gets in the way of prosperity and goodness and purity and light. And he goes from that to becoming the absolute opposite of that. He opens all the jail cells and says, run free, but I will be your warden out there as well. He unleashes evil everywhere. And what's most interesting to me about Sargeras is the reason why. It's not like in Arthas' character where he is corrupted, driven into insanity basically, and locked away. If you remember when the Lich King with Arthas, as the Lich King dies on the top of the Icecrown Citadel, we have that moment where he returns to human form and his father is there and you have this little tragic ending. Sargeras is not that. He made a decision to become evil. It's something that was in him all the time. He just saw a good enough reason to become it and then did so. And the reason why is one of the most interesting ideas in World of Warcraft and in the world in general. He basically said, I've been fighting evil as a part of the Pantheon for longer than I can remember. I've been locking away these forces, these demonic forces, and they keep breaking out. And evil seems to only spread no matter how hard I fight it. So he takes these concerns to the rest rest of the Pantheon and says, I'm getting to a point where I don't see why we're doing this. And instead of responding lovingly and warmly and saying we all feel this way, the Pantheon shuns him. And his new understanding of the nature of good and evil, that they aren't necessarily diametrically opposed philosophies, leads him to become the chief antagonist to the Pantheon. And in some ways, you could see Sargeras in the same way that like Satanists view Lucifer, not as a force of ultimate darkness, but as the chief liberator from the dictatorship that is the rule of the Pantheon. Now, his means of achieving that freedom are completely monstrous. But the reason why he's my favorite villain, in addition to absolutely filling all of the criteria I set out and then some, is because if you put on a different set of glasses, you can see him as a strange kind of hero. Now, you can only really do that when you step away from the game and start thinking about it. In the game, as playable characters in that world, he's an absolute villain. He is the absolute villain. Sargeras, definitely number one. I cannot wait for the expansion in which we finally get to face him down. It probably won't be for another decade or so, but I will be there for it. So that's going to do it for me, guys. That is my top 10 WoW villains who are still a threat as of Warlords of Draenor patch 6.1. What do you guys think? Do you have some additions to this list? Please let me know in the comments below. Do you have a criteria that maybe I should be thinking about that I'm not thinking about? Let me know. Please do like this video, share it all over the place, subscribe to MMO Play, check out the website. I have been the Higgs from MMO-Play.com, and I will see you next time.